I knew it. They killed their daughter.
You were doing it? Maybe you'd done it before. Maybe you just did it that night. Perhaps your wife discovered you. Whatever it was, JonBenet cried out. You killed her.
6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey captivated the nation.
Someone killed this 6-year-old child.
It received national news attention right away.
The press was going wild at birth.
It was the morning after Christmas, but inside the Ramsey house, nothing felt holy anymore. Boulder, Colorado, lay still beneath a fresh layer of snow that seemed to muffle the world, the kind of morning where holiday decorations hung heavy on porches and streets looked untouched, almost serene. But behind the stone facade of 755 15th Street, that quiet was something else entirely. At 5:52 a.m., the first ripple of something unimaginable began. Even before the sun rose, even before investigators had a chance to process what they would later see, something about this morning felt wrong. JonBenet Ramsey is gone. And this wasn't just another tragic headline. This was a child, a Christmas night, a locked house, and a family who should have been her safe haven. The kind of story that doesn't fade, not from the press, not from late-night podcasts, not from the minds of anyone who's ever looked at that little girl's face and felt the weight of what happened to her. It's not just a case, it's a mirror reflecting contradictions no one's been able to reconcile. How does a father claim heartbreak yet carry his daughter's body upstairs, seemingly calm? How does a mother beg for help but sound rehearsed, theatrical even? And how does a 9-year-old boy sleep through a kidnapping, a ransom note, the chaos of that morning, only to wake up and eat breakfast like nothing happened? The death itself was brutal, but the aftermath was chaos dressed as order. A media storm. Accusations fired like bullets. DNA debates, lawsuits, TV specials, dissecting every detail until there was nothing left but theories. No arrests. No convictions, not even a clear motive. And nearly 3 decades later, the case is still as cold as that Boulder winter morning. But maybe that's because we've been asking the wrong questions. Maybe this wasn't just about whether a stranger slipped in unnoticed or if someone inside the house was responsible. Maybe the truth lives in a shadowy space between those two narratives. Because there were no footprints in the snow. No sign of forced entry. No shattered lock, no obvious break-in. And if there was no stranger, then who was left? This is the story of JonBenet Ramsey. From the outside, the Ramseys had built the American dream. That mansion's nearly 7,000 square feet of winding staircases, stone archways, and Christmas lights that glimmered against fresh snow wasn't just a house, it was a symbol. People whispered, "Must be nice," when they passed by, and it was. Wealth, beauty, perfection on display. John Ramsey, the father, was quiet, measured, a man of achievement who built a tech empire, Access Graphics, a company worth over $1 billion by 1996. That Christmas, his bonus alone was $18,000. He wasn't flashy, he preferred control over spectacle. But his life, his home, his carefully ordered world all spoke of power and precision. Then there was Patsy. If John was controlled, Patsy was charismatic. A former Miss West Virginia, she was elegant, meticulous, a master of presentation. Boulder's social elite adored her. And she adored her children, especially JonBenet, whose life became a mirror of Patsy's own world of crowns, sequins, pageants. To outsiders, it was glamorous. Inside, it was carefully curated to perfection. But perfection can be a mask. From the very first day JonBenet's body was found in the basement, suspicion didn't fall on some faceless monster lurking in the shadows. It fell on the people inside that house, the ones who should have been protecting her. And for years, every piece of evidence, every whisper of doubt has been twisted to fit one of 3 stories. Some believe John was at the center, that he knew what happened, or worse, that he was part of it. The detail that made everyone pause was how he found her. That basement wasn't an obvious place to search, it was a maze. Yet he went straight there. And when he carried her body upstairs, contaminating what could have been crucial evidence, people asked why. Was it grief? Or was it control? Others looked at Patsy. They said maybe she snapped a fight, an accident, a moment of anger, and staged a kidnapping to cover it up. The ransom note seemed to point that way. 2.5 pages long, 370 words, written on her own stationery, with her own pen. Not in a panic, but carefully, deliberately. Some of its phrases even matched her own writing style, her own voice. Then there's Burke, 9 years old at the time. Could a boy that age hurt his sister? Some say yes. They point to his behavior in interviews, his odd calmness, the pineapple JonBenet ate before she died, and a bowl of pineapple that Burke was eating that night. And for others, the answer isn't about who struck the blow. It's that the family worked together to protect one another. Writing the ransom note, moving her body, locking down their story before the police even arrived. That's why they lawyered up. That's why they hired PR consultants. That's why, even under crushing pressure, they rarely cracked. The strangest part, all of these theories are built on the same evidence. The same ransom note, the same autopsy, the same crime scene. And yet, the closer you look, the more suspects emerge. And maybe that's why, for decades, no one has been able to find the truth. Because the truth might be hiding in plain sight. Take the ransom note. At first glance, it's exactly what you'd expect, a plea for money. But when you read it closely, it feels like something else entirely. It's theatrical, it's absurd. Phrases like, "We are a small foreign faction," sound like dialogue from a bad movie. And they might be lines from 90s. Thrillers like Speed and Dirty Harry are scattered throughout. It's as if this note wasn't written to communicate with kidnappers at all. It was written to be found, to be read, to control the story. And then there's the $118,000 ransom demand, the exact number John had just received as a Christmas bonus. That's not random. That's intimate knowledge. But what makes this letter so chilling is not what it says, it's what it doesn't. No instructions, no follow-up, no intention to return JonBenet alive. It was a theater. And the rest of the crime scene seems to tell the same story. A broken basement window that John claimed he smashed months earlier when he locked himself out. A suitcase positioned below it, as if someone used it to climb in. But there was no dust disturbed, no scuffs, no broken cobwebs. The back door may have been left unlocked. The alarm wasn't set. But no one heard anything. No one saw anything. Even the snow outside showed no footprints. The only trace of an outsider was a single boot print near her body. It wasn't the family's. For a brief moment, investigators thought they had something. But that hope was quickly erased like everything else when the crime scene became chaotic. Family friends. A pastor. Officers walked freely through the house before it was secured. Evidence was trampled, contaminated, lost. JonBenet's body was found in the basement wine cellar. She was wearing her nightgown, her small wrists bound behind her back with a nylon cord. A garrote made from that same cord and a broken paintbrush had been twisted tightly around her neck. She had 2 fatal injuries, the garrote strangulation and a devastating skull fracture nearly 9 inches long. Either one could have killed her. There were signs of sexual trauma. Some injuries were fresh. Others, according to certain pathologists, suggested a troubling history. Her underwear showed fluid stains, and a white substance in the vaginal area sparked debate. Was it evidence of abuse, or simply lotion or soap residue, as the family's legal team insisted? Her body was carefully placed, not dragged. She was draped with a blanket. Duct tape, once over her mouth, had been stuck to the blanket. And every object used against her, the cord, the tape, the paintbrush, came from inside that house. Then there were the puncture marks. 2 tiny pairs, one on her neck, one on her back, perfectly spaced, almost identical to marks left by a stun gun. Detective Lou Smith became convinced this was how she was subdued. He even tested the theory on pork skin, producing nearly identical marks. But why would an intruder bring a stun gun, write a letter, and vanish without a trace? And if this was staged, why would the family create evidence that pointed outside the house? Every detail is a contradiction. Every clue opens 2 doors. And every theory leaves you staring at that little girl's face, wondering how a home filled with Christmas lights and gifts could become the setting for one of America's darkest mysteries. Because maybe this isn't a story about monsters breaking in. Maybe it's a story about what happens when monsters already live inside. And maybe that's why, all these years later, no one's been able to look away. You hear a voice before you see a face. It's steady, too steady, some say. A mother reports a kidnapping, and the words land like ice on tile, "We have a kidnapping." Not my daughter. Please, God, help me. Just we. It's a small thing, a phrase you could miss if you blink, and yet it sits in your chest like a splinter. That's how this story works. Nothing screams. Everything whispers. If you've ever loved a child, you know how the house sounds when they're asleep, the hush, the soft domestic grammar of a home at rest. Now imagine that quiet breaking, not with a crash, not with a scream, but with the kind of motion that leaves no fingerprints on your memory. People talk about stun guns, and then people like Dr. Werner Spitz say no, that's not how electricity behaves on skin. Too clean. No burns. No muscle convulsions. Maybe the marks were pressure. Maybe they were something else. Maybe they were nothing. The hardest part is that maybe finds you in the dark and keeps you there. A weapon was never found. Not in the house. Not in the yard. Not anywhere. And absence can be loud when everyone leans over the silence and calls it evidence. What do you do with a phone call that feels both urgent and oddly curated, like grief dressed for public consumption? Some hear a mother trying to hold herself together. Others hear distance, choreography, a sequence that leads with a note, and only then a child. And when the line is supposed to be dead, when the call is supposedly over, there's a murmur, a tangle of syllables that some insist are 3 voices pressed into 6 seconds. What did you do? We're not speaking to you. A faint reply that might be a child. It's like staring at the night sky and being told to find a constellation. If someone draws the lines for you, you'll see it forever. If they don't, it's just stars. Experts argued, the FBI weighed in, and the official word was inconclusive. But inconclusive doesn't close the door. It leaves it cracked just enough for imagination to slip through. If you want the comfort of answers, DNA seems like a clean place to start. Numbers, alleles, profiles, science. We like science because it sounds like certainty. Early tests found a male profile not matching the family. That should feel definitive, right? Except it didn't match anyone else either. New methods arrived with shiny names and sharper needles, and the same suggestion returned, unknown male. For some, that was a doorway an intruder could walk through. For others, it was a thread too thin to hold a weight this heavy. Touch DNA can ride into a scene on the back of a factory worker's glove, a packaging line, a store shelf. It doesn't timestamp its arrival. It doesn't tell a story, it just hums, and we decide what song it's singing. Then came the complication that no one wanted. Multiple unknown contributors. Not one clean silhouette, but a crowd of shadows. If you believe in a single intruder, that's a problem. If you believe in a contaminated scene, it's an explanation. Technology kept improving, machines got better at catching whispers, and still the name never came. Databases stayed silent. Genealogy reached its branches into family trees and grabbed nothing but air. And as the scientific vocabulary got longer, the story didn't get clearer. It got denser. You could drown in the reports and still come up gasping, unsure which way the surface was. We do this human thing when answers refuse to arrive. We look at faces. We study tone, posture, smiles given at the wrong time, an offhand sentence that sounds like it came from a script. We assign meaning, and sometimes we're right, and sometimes we're just making sense of our own discomfort. A boy smiles on television and the internet falls into a hush of judgment. People expect sorrow to look a certain way, and when it doesn't, they call it evidence. But grief doesn't have manners. Shock can make a person calm. Guilt can make a person hysterical. We want behavior to be a map. Too often it's a mirror. The kitchen holds a bowl, a flashlight, fingerprints that tell a story if you're already halfway convinced. A child's stomach remembers fruit. The mind wants to connect those dots and draw a moment in a quiet house where hands reach for something sweet, where irritation sparks, where a single instant becomes irreversible. You can recreate the force with a similar flashlight and say, yes, a child could do this. You can also stand in the same kitchen and feel how wrong it is to speculate your way into a child's heart. The line between explanation and accusation is thinner than we think. People talk about prior incidents, strange little storms in a family's weather, golf clubs, sibling conflict, the messy, embarrassing behaviors that children sometimes grow through, the ones we don't put in scrapbooks. Some take those details and stack them into a tower called motive. Others call it a pile of ordinary childhood noise repurposed by hindsight. When the case is cold, everything you can lay your hand on feels warm enough to be important. There are allegations that point toward a mother who looked too composed and a father who moved a body when he shouldn't have. There are claims about a note written on paper from the house and arguments about who could have penned its strange, theatrical voice. Even handwriting becomes a battleground where the lines wobble and refuse to land on certainty. You hear about a paintbrush snapped for a garrote, and people ask, who would need that to control a 6-year-old? Someone weaker? Someone staging? It's a chilling thought, and it is also still only a thought. In rooms like this, theories learn to dress like facts if you let them. The housekeeper has a memory of where a knife was hidden, where a blanket came from, and those memories are laid against the floor plan of a home like an overlay on a crime scene. Only someone who knew the house, people say. Or maybe a stranger had time. Or maybe the scene was touched by care, by panic, by the impossible urge to do something gentle in the aftermath of something unforgivable. We use words like staging as if love and horror can't occupy the same square foot, when in truth human beings are messy enough to contain both. You keep coming back to the 911 call. The choice of we, the order of the words, the early hour that defied the letter left on the stairs. Do you call for help when a note forbids it? Most of us would. Terror doesn't negotiate with instructions. And yet, when distrust has taken root, the ordinary choice looks suspicious. That's the gravity of a story like this. Once suspicion enters, it bribes every detail to take its side. I want to tell you that science will save us, that the new machines will sing the right name, that the last test was simply the one before the answer. But all these years later, the case is a room where the light flickers and never fully turns on. Investigators came and went. Leads multiplied and then thinned like winter trees. The official line stayed the same, no charges that held, no day in court that finished the sentence. People hold onto the theory that fits their soul best, intruder, family, accident, rage, cover-up, and then they go looking for evidence that smiles back. If you felt it the way your mind wants to pick a side and then refuses to put it down, you're not alone. There's a reason this story stays. It's not just the tragedy of a child, it's the ache of not knowing, of standing at the edge of what happened and never being allowed to cross. We mean making creatures. We hate endings that don't resolve. And so we turn speculation into scaffolding and climb. Some reach the family. Some reach a stranger. All of us are trying to reach peace. Maybe the most honest thing we can do is admit where the floor gives way. Admit that a phone call can sound rehearsed and still be real. Admit that DNA can feel authoritative and still mislead. Admit that behavior can look wrong and still be grief. Admit that a theory can be beautifully constructed and still be untrue. In that humility, we stop pretending we can love a child better by winning the argument, and we start loving her by staying with the discomfort instead of decorating it. If you were expecting a verdict, I can't give you one. No one can, not right now. But I can give you this, a moment to stand in the quiet and feel the weight of a life that should have kept going. A reminder that certainty is not the same thing as truth, and an invitation to be gentle with your judgments, with the people you've made into villains or heroes, with yourself for wanting so badly to know. When you think about that, call the word choice. The tone, the timing, let it be complicated. When you think about the marks, remember the doctor who said no, and the absence of the device that would have said yes. When you hear about DNA, hold both realities, the possibility of an outsider and the reality of contamination. When a theory whispers in your ear, ask it to show its work, and then ask if the work is more than grief arranged into reason. I don't want you to leave this story with sharper opinions. I want you to leave with a little more care for the way we listen, for the way we look at people under impossible lights, for the easy seduction of a tidy narrative in a place where only fragments survive. If you've ever felt small in the face of not knowing, that makes you honest. It means you're still reachable. Maybe that's the only piece of truth we can hold without hurting it. A child deserved a lifetime, and a family, whatever you believe about them, lived through a morning no one should ever have to live. The rest is corridors and echoes. We can walk them together, we can keep asking, but we don't have to break the world into guilt and pure to honor what was lost. If you carry anything out of this house tonight, let it be that. And if you find yourself reaching for certainty, notice the reach, unclench your fist, and let the question remain a question. Sometimes that's the bravest thing we can do.